One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
And always feel that your life has ultimate significance.
The only way we're going to get some of this oppression and exploitation away from us or aside from us is come together against the common enemy.
Hello, this is Todd Hollis. Welcome to Civil Action. As many of you know, these are strange times that are before us. Our country is in somewhat of a state of emergency. There are many of us, who have decided that, our voices need to be heard. As you can see on the news and in your local cities, people have decided that they want to reach out to their local governments and they want to express their disinterest in African Americans being treated, in an inhumane manner and expressing their First Amendment rights. Today, I have two individuals who are on the front line, so to speak, Miss Liliana Watling and Miss Sofia Sunseri, her mom. Hey, I want to introduce both of you and thank you so much for being a part of my show here today. How are you?
We're okay. I mean,
Okay,
we're
awesome.
You can be right now. Yeah.
Awesome. Tell me a little bit about yourself, Miss Sofia. Where are you from? What do you do? Tell me just a few little tidbits about who you are as a person.
I'm from Pittsburgh, and I ran from Pittsburgh when I was 18. I went to Kappa, and I was first full-time graduating class at Kappa, and then went out to Southern California and stayed there for close to 20 years. And then moved back here about 15 years ago.
Okay.
And I'm a musician and a mom mainly.
Okay.
And
okay.
and I teach cooking and resourceful cooking and voice. And I work a bit for Girls Rock. And
all right.
Yeah.
And you're an activist?
And I'm an activist, apparently.
All right. All right. And who is that sitting next to you?
This is Liliana, my oldest daughter.
Okay. Hi, Liliana.
Hi.
So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm 15. I go to City of Bridges High School in the South Side. And I don't know, I play piano and I'm what else? This is really funny. Yeah.
So unlike many of us, we've seen the horrifying and graphic video of how Mr. George Floyd was killed. What was your reaction to that?
For me, years ago I was an activist, and I led a walkout on a high school, and I'm very familiar with being arrested. I'm very familiar with police and riot gear against you. This time, coming back into activism as a mom, I have a very different view. And I have a very different view of it. It's really from a mom's point of view, and if that. It absolutely destroys. I can't. I mean, it's like I even just hearing his voice, anything like that. It's just I'm like I break. I feel like I'm breaking inside.
Now, as graphic as it was, what was your response to it? What did you feel as if you had to do something, and if you felt that way, what is it that you decided that you wanted to do?
Well, I mean, I admittedly have anger. I'm a survivor of incest, and I'm constantly dealing with the and having gained strength from that survival and now into a thriving stage. But I definitely tap into that anger. And one of my early mentors taught me about being an activist and tapping into your anger and directing your anger. And
Understood.
yeah, and immediately, you know, I get really angry, and I get in my home, I can get, as a matter of fact, my kids, they'll be like, Mom, you got to dial it down. You got to dial it down. And when I go out into the world, I definitely dial it down because, you know, I don't, because I can get so, you know, because being a mom, you know, it's just like I sit there and I go, but also just having my life, having the experiences that I've had, I've tapped into that anger, and I know how powerful it can be, and also how destructive it can be. So, so understanding that, and you know, I see it in my kid. You know, she's in touch with her anger, and she's actually the one that got us out the door the other day to go back down to the protest in East Liberty. I don't know that it went.
Yeah, I want to kind of ask you about that. I mean, I guess from a human, you know, standpoint, some might say, you know, do you want to expose your children to potentially, you know, dangerous people or potentially dangerous environment? Had any of those thoughts crossed your mind? And obviously, since you went, you know, what was the deciding factor that made you say, well, this is probably something we need to do?
So, yes, of course, you know, and I can see how people would be like, how can you bring your kid? Or, you know, how can you, you know, in the middle of a pandemic, you know, all these questions have, as a matter of fact, Liliana and I just had this conversation. Yeah. We just had the conversation because I told her, I said, we are in the middle of a pandemic. We are, you know, we are a family that is, you know, we wear masks everywhere we go.
Right.
You know, we're still, for all intents and purposes, we're kind of still in code red. But then as far as the protest, it's hard to be in code red, right? So, right. But how we have a strategy when we go into the protest, we try to do as much social distancing. We double mask. As far as we have a really protective mask, and then we have another mask on top of that. So,
okay.
So
what about the danger element?
The danger element, yeah, it was, the danger element is something that keeps me up at night. I was up at 4:30 in the morning this morning, and it's yeah. But the thing about it is complacency. If both my husband and I, if we would raise children who are complacent, that would be horrifying, you know. But the other thing too is that what we talked about this morning is like when you go into these crowds, you know, I'm teaching her who to look for, right? Who do you look for? You're always looking about. You're not going into a crowd. You're not going into a protest naively, you know, thinking that everybody is there and everybody's, oh, we're all, you know, in unity. No, there will be people here who are going to be disruptors, and you have to, and trying to teach her how to spot them as well as we can. I'm not an expert, you know, and people are very good at at hiding, you know. So.
Now, this next question I have is for Liliana. Liliana, you're 15 years old. I'm sure you've read about the civil rights movement in the 1960s, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you know, what was your motivating factor for telling your mom and dad that they need to be a part of this, you know, this protest?
Well, my first thing was that I like to be involved with protests and anything political that's going on, because I think, like, in a time like this, especially if you are just like sitting back and not doing anything, you're choosing a side whether you realize it or not. So when I like heard about the protests going on, like we didn't have to stay for the entire time, but just that we're there and we're in like touch with the community and that we know what's going on, and we're not just like sitting back at home and watching TV. Because for me, the fact that like there would be a protest going on that's like maybe a 20-minute drive away that I could get to, and people could be getting potentially like they could be getting tear gassed and killed, and I was sitting here just like watching TV and relaxing. It was an unnerving thing for me to think about, and I'm like, that's just not right. Like, I
Sure.
should be there helping.
Now, did you have these kind of conversations with your peers, and did they feel the same way, or are you kind of like unique in this position?
Well, no, a lot of people that I know feel the same way. A lot of the kids that I go to school with are trying to get to the protests if their parents are allowing them to.
Yeah.
And one of the kids that I go to school with, he was at the protest on Monday, and him and his dad were trying to help out and help people, and they were bringing water and baking soda to help them get tear gas out of their eyes.
So did you fear that perhaps you could be hurt, or you could be tear gassed, or maybe your parents or your siblings?
Yeah. Whenever we go to a protest, like one like this, I have to just like kind of be quiet for a little bit and just think and be like, okay, if this happens, like this is what I'm going to do. But we also, going into most of these, we bring gas masks and goggles just in case there is like a situation where we are exposed to tear gas that it won't hurt us.
Sure.
And just
we also have our contingency plan where it's like this: if we get split up, you run back. We meet here.
Whenever we go into a protest, we say like, if we get split up, run back to the car. And whenever like, I can get very tense whenever we go to protest because I know that there is a high possibility that someone I know, or like my mom or my sister, could get hit with a rubber bullet, could get tear gassed. And that's just like, it's not something that I thought that I would have to think about or deal with at 15 years old, because it was something that I read about and learned about, and now I'm actually having to experience it in my life, and it's almost surreal.
I can certainly see why you would say that. So let's talk about your experiences once you got to the protest. I know just recently your mother had posted something on social media where she had met one of the protesters, and I guess there was an incident where he had been injured, and that's kind of how we met. But before we get to that specific, particular incident, let's talk about what you saw when you got there. What were your interactions like with other protesters and or the police?
Well, on Monday, when we first got there, in the beginning of the protest, it was pretty peaceful, and we were just like sitting down, and there were people talking, and then we got up and we started walking through East Liberty, and we passed a Target, and there were like two policemen dressed in military gear sitting like on top of the Target with basically like stuff to release tear gas and shoot rubber bullets with. So that's when I started getting a little worried. And then we only really stayed for like 45 minutes, and then after that we left because my mom could sense that like things were starting to get a little amped up. So we left, and then later on my friend called me and told me like what was going on at the protest, and he sounded kind of worried. So I was like, okay, well, then like let's go down. So we went down there, and it was really weird because you could see like on one hand there were like these people running around frantically, and they were like trying to basically figure out like trying to help people, and you would also see to your left like, oh, here's like a bunch of policemen just like standing in like formation ready to attack people. And it was really weird and also they weren't like helping anyone at all. And then on the other hand, I was also getting like calls from my friend telling me like, we're going to be leaving soon because I see like policemen on horses and they're getting ready to tear gas people again.
Did it seem as if the police were allowing the protesters to express their First Amendment right to protest? Neither one of you can answer that question.
Mom, do you want to? Okay.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
When we were there, like, I didn't knowing what had just happened, it didn't seem like they were, but when we were there, they weren't, from what I saw, they weren't doing too much, but it was probably because they had already just, like, attacked.
They had already attacked.
They had already attacked, so they were just kind of standing there, and so the answer is no, they weren't, because if they were letting them protest, they wouldn't have tear gassed them or anything like that.
Well, the other thing.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, the thing is that when we pulled up, we drove past the Target. We were on Center. We passed over Penn. When we passed over Penn, it was like we entered a different world.
Yeah.
It was almost like we got transported to, the news that you're watching from another part of the world, because there were people.
Kind of surreal.
It was, and there were people not knowing what to do. You could tell they were conflicted because they didn't want to leave, but they knew they had to, because if you looked beyond right where the Whole Foods is, so everybody goes to peacefully shop, or whoever goes to peacefully shop. It's the National Guard and a big cloud of whatever it was. Okay.
Sure.
And it was just, it might have been like near the Goodwill, like in that area, that's where they kind of there was like the Goodwill to the Whole Foods.
You're talking about on Highland Avenue?
I'm talking about on Center.
On Center Avenue. Okay. So we're in East Liberty on Center Avenue.
Yeah. So you're looking down Center, right? So we drive to the intersection because we talked to this one couple and they're like, they just gassed people. And this was on Penn and Center. They're like, they just gassed people. And you could tell these people were like just stunned, just stunned at just the fact that they did it. Just the fact that they did it on these peaceful we were there, and the people who ran the protest were so peaceful, were so committed to a peaceful protest. We were sitting in the street. There was music. Somebody at one point, we couldn't hear everything because the microphone systems, at protests aren't the state of the art, right?
Right.
So, but everybody was you could just feel this moment of just like, okay, we can all breathe right now. All right, we can all just kind of, because the organizers made you feel like we got this. We've got this.
It was the calm before the storm.
Right.
It was.
So let me talk about the elephant in the room. Okay, so both you and your daughter are Caucasian, and seems like you're educated. You come from what would presumably be a very structured lifestyle, and this is not something that you necessarily have to do, and you're putting you and your family at great risk to do it. So the question that I have in my mind is why do it?
Because, I don't know. I feel like it's a simple answer, and it might sound like.
If you could speak just a little bit louder, just speak a little bit louder for me.
Because we should, just because we have the ability to. If we have a car and we have water and we have if we can get to the protest, we should be there
to help people.
Yeah, I mean,
it's what you do as a human being.
Yeah,
it's what you do as a community member. It doesn't
it's not like a thing where it's like, oh, we shouldn't be acting like, oh, this isn't our problem. It's like, no, it's a problem. Like, if you can help, you have to help, because the thing is, it's just like George Floyd was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
It's like people are upset, and they have a right to be. It's like, this has been going on for years and nobody's done nothing. And
it's just getting worse and worse and worse, you know. It's just like,
and
you know,
people are
So,
angry.
so it's like from what I'm gathering, it's like when you guys, are walking through stores or you potentially get stopped by the police. I mean, you know that, when they look at you, they're looking at you differently as how they would look at, the typical African American teenager. But from your response to me just moments ago, you're saying that, it's the human thing to do. These are issues that are affecting all of us, not just black people.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and the other thing too is that when you see this, when you, you know, how do you put this? When you see an injustice and there's something that you can do, you do it. Period.
So so you believe that there is in fact an injustice as it relates to African Americans and the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I can run down the damn street and not get shot. Okay. Now, being a woman, we definitely have a different set of rules that we have to abide by. Okay.
Sure.
But still, we're not going to be like on a run. We're not going to be worried that someone's going to come and shoot us.
Yeah. I'm not worried. I'm not worried that somebody's going to, at least now, I'm not, I mean, I hope not,
Sure.
worried that somebody's going to shoot my Caucasian daughter. Right.
Sure.
Even if she has a hoodie on, guess what? Not bad.
That's never something that I've had to worry about.
And the fact that, people talk about, George Floyd's criminal record. And just like Lil said, he's the straw that broke the camel's back. I don't care about his criminal record. It's just like this kind of injustice is just this kind of okay. And I don't want to get all into my anger trip, but.
Well, we're all angry, so you can get angry.
It's just like, and, I don't know, Lorenzo said it beautifully. He said it beautifully on when he came back and he did his Facebook post. He said,
you're talking about Lorenzo Rouille?
Yeah. And he came back and he said, we can't do anything right being black, and it's just like that. We can't live in a world like that. This young man is so peaceful. This young man has such good intentions. This is the type of person we should be raising up. I do not want to live in a world, do not want to raise my child in a world that people like Lorenzo aren't lifted up and saying, hey, I want this kind of kid in leadership. I want this kid to be raised up and to be, I'm going to get political here. I don't want the Trumps of the world. I don't want the Steve Kings of the world. These people are corroded, corrupt people. And I'm being very contained right now.
I'm
Okay.
sure, I'm sure you are. But, there's so much to this. There are those that say that the movement should be done differently, that it's creating, somewhat of a problem as it relates to people and their businesses being broken into and property being damaged. And the message, although it's important, it should be, presented in a different way. What is your take on that?
Well, I don't think people should be damaging like small businesses and stuff like that. But if a Target gets damaged, it's like they're a big company. I think they'll be okay. But also I just think it's the wrong thing that they're focusing on, because it's just like people are mad. It's like, if you didn't want this to happen, then you should have fixed this many years ago.
Oh yeah.
Like if you didn't do anything all these years ago when people were being killed, and the only reason that we know about George Floyd is because he died. Like imagine
Right.
how many people like him who haven't died there have been. And I don't know, I feel like if you want to focus on the looting and stuff like that, you can, but that's not the right thing to be focusing on. And honestly, this if you didn't want this problem to happen, then you should have fixed it all those years ago when people were still angry, but now they're just completely pissed off because no one ever did anything.
And no one's listening. You know, you know, I called the police department yesterday because we would like to go to, there's a protest today and there's a protest on Saturday. And I'm genuinely scared for our safety. And, you know, the two police officers both gave me the same answer. They said, listen, once the protest is done, go home. Don't stay out on the street. And I'm like, okay. And then the one police officer said, you know, the one bad apple made it bad for the whole country. And that really made me think. And you know, I'm not the first to say this at all, but the silence, and I get, you know, people are saying you want these people to stand up. You want these cops to stand up against an institution that they've worked so hard to put themselves, you know, they've worked hard for their jobs, their pensions, their, you know, all that kind of stuff. I don't even know if they have pensions anymore, but so they, you know, they've worked so hard and you want them to stand up against it. And I'm saying, yes, I do. Because the thing about it is it's not one bad apple. It's this militarized, immoral, and racist bushel of apples. And it's just poisoning everything. And I'm sure they're good cops. Of course they're good cops.
Like,
but you can't say, I'm a good cop and go out and gas innocent people, especially, I mean, Lorenzo has it on his video where they gassed a guy just sitting there, you know, and it's just like, how is that okay? You know?
So what about the notion that, you know, within the mix of protesters, the peaceful protesters, that there were intermingled members of Antifa and or the Boogaloo Boys who were using tactics to potentially change the narrative of the peaceful protest process. What should the cops do when those kind of instances break out?
I mean, the thing is that there were
one of the protests on Saturday, we saw one guy who was one of the Boogaloo Boys.
Boogaloo Boys.
One guy.
Yeah. Who was
I can't hear you. You gotta speak a little bit louder.
One guy who was one of the Boogaloo Boys, and he was very, very clear about it. And to what I saw, it was one guy. So I think the police would have been able to control that.
Yeah. And he wasn't there. Apparently, you know, there's so many different, I mean, I don't know this guy, but he said he wanted to start the conversation, and he said that the Boogaloo Boys were misrepresented and everything. And I'm just like, okay.
We didn't know who they were.
Yeah. And I went up to him because my tactic is when somebody really, really scares me, and this guy really scared me because I'm pro-gun regulation and he had a t-shirt on that was otherwise, I walk up to them and I talk to them.
Okay. So you confront the person.
Yeah, and not in a way of like, not in an adversarial way, but more in a curious way. It's just like, okay, so what's your take, you know? And just letting them talk and just letting them asking them questions, because the more I know, I don't know if ever heard of Musashi. Musashi is a Japanese philosopher and warrior, and one of the rules is keep your enemies close. And so in today's days, you got to know your enemy, and if this guy is an enemy, I want to know him. So instead of having somebody else create the narrative. So
you mentioned Lorenzo. So Lorenzo obviously had an incident at some point during the course of the protest, and you and your family came in contact with him. Tell me in your own words, what transpired and what steps you took to address that issue.
Yeah, that was crazy. Yeah, because we came down
I
center.
heard it was
Yeah,
crazy.
it was absolutely crazy. It was just like,
Mhm.
so we come down center, and there's just like Center and Highland, and it was just like, okay, I'm the only car there. You know, we were in the only car there. So
we were
I
asking if anybody needed
if anybody needed any help.
Yeah.
And everybody was good there, right?
Yeah.
So we reversed it and we went through the alley.
So
going the wrong-
you were looking to see if there were any protesters that needed help.
Yeah.
Okay, and
So
you were
we had a
driving.
We
And we had a car. Yeah, we have a car. We're driving. We had water,
Okay.
to flush eyes. Because we were thinking, oh, we're going to help people flush their eyes out, things like that. Right?
Now, were you working with the organizers of the protest, or did you just take this measure on your own?
We just did it.
We just did it.
Okay, all right. I didn't mean to interrupt the story.
Yeah, we got a little bit of crazy.
Okay, all right,
I mean,
all right.
to do this, you have to have a little bit, but to have kids, you got to have that little moment of like crazy too,
So you decided that you were going to attempt to assist the protesters, with water or any kind of first aid that they might potentially need.
Right.
Well, yeah, because
Okay.
we weren't able to stay there for the entire time, so I just kind of figured like the protest is mostly over now, so we might as well go and see if anybody needs our help.
Okay.
Yeah, and there was an urgency to it because her friend,
My friend was there, and I
Yeah.
was worried.
yeah. So,
Okay.
and her
So-
teacher, go ahead.
My teacher.
So when you,
sorry.
oh,
you-
okay, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Two of my teachers called me, and they were telling me, like, they told me how one of my friends was at the protest. So I called him to make sure he was okay, and he was just telling me what was going on, and I was just like, oh, this is like really bad, and it's so close to my house that like we can easily get in the car and go.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you come into contact with Lorenzo?
So we went the wrong way down that little alley that's right where the CVS is that leads to Penn Avenue. And right there were some kids there. One of them actually happened to be a student in the cooking class because we go to ELPC, and he was in my cooking class there. And they start telling us that there's someone having a convulsion down the street, and they were pointing down the street. And they're like, there's somebody having a convulsion. There's somebody having a convulsion. So, or a seizure.
Yeah,
Seizure.
seizure.
He said a seizure. So he gets out onto the street and stops the little bit of traffic that's there. And so we turn from the alley left onto Penn Avenue, heading towards ELPC, right?
Uh-huh.
Heading into East Liberty.
Okay.
We get to the corner. We get to the intersection of Penn and Highland. And we pass through just a little bit just to get through the intersection. And we see everybody congregating around, down on the ground, this amazing group of people that was trying to help Lorenzo.
Yeah.
And we just screamed out the window, what do you guys need? Do you need any help? And they just said, we need an ambulance. And there were no
No offense, but we weren't going to be getting an ambulance.
No,
anytime soon.
at this time, literally, it was like dominoes in reverse. It was like within each like intersection. There were like, you could feel. I mean, we were focused on Lorenzo, but you could feel the tension building, and the cops just on horses on this just boom 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 on each intersection.
It was scary
Okay.
because there was this moment where they were like, call 911, and I was like, I don't know how much that's going to do right now.
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. So so we were just like, get him in the car. So my two daughters went out, and some other people went out on the street just to make sure there were no cars coming. And they gently carried Lorenzo to the car.
Mm-hmm.
And Lorenzo was in really, really, really bad shape. And
Yeah.
and I go back to the mom thing.
Sure.
Okay. My mom kicked in, and I'm just like, not today. Hell no. This is not happening today. I couldn't believe that as a police officer, where is your morality?
Mhm.
In this this, I mean, and Lorenzo he's a young man, but he's a child. He's a child.
Mm-hmm.
He's a young man who's just coming into, he's, and he even said, they were like saying, don't shoot, and
Mm-hmm.
they shot him. Not only but with rubber bullets and it's like, this is like.
Also, rubber bullets, you probably already know by now, they're not small. They're like as big as my hand.
Yeah, and there's lead in them. They're not, for people that don't know that, they're not these little rubber bullets. They're
rubber
lead.
because there's rubber around the lead inside of it.
Yeah, and he couldn't
It's shameful
breathe.
that you even had to experience that. That's shameful. Well, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sophia.
No, and then he couldn't breathe. I mean, he couldn't breathe. He was clutching his heart. He was talking about his back. His hands were curled like this, just like literally like this. And I mean, it's just like this. And this was a peaceful protest. Cover that. Get his footage when he was telling the people who did the looting. They quickly addressed it and said, no, you don't do this. Address that. Not. So anyway, but
Also, there's a video just hours before of a man giving water to the policemen because they've been standing out there so long.
Yeah.
Well, we certainly don't want to, we don't want to convict all of the policemen. There's some really, really good police officers, and they're kind of caught in the middle of all of this as well. I'm sure that
definitely,
they have their own personal opinions about whether this is something that should or shouldn't take place, but they also have a job to do. So, listen, I kind of ran out of time, but I want to thank you both for your incredible acts of courage and your commitment to a process and a movement that, as you both have said, is not just about the struggle of African Americans. It's truly, in fact, an issue that is going to be a part of all of our various social consciousnesses. And Sophia, you're 15, so 30 years.
Liliana, I wish I was 15. I'm 50, brother. I'm 50.
Liliana, you're 15, so 30 years from now, you're going to look back on this, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of stories to tell your beautiful babies, and hopefully I will be a part of that somehow, some way. But I want to thank you both, for coming, because I realize of all the places that you could be, you are right here with me. For all the people that are watching this, I encourage you to visit my social media page at LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and every other platform that I may have. Come check us out. Leave comments. Certainly, we're going to encourage Liliana and Sophia to join that platform. If you have any questions for them, I'm sure they'll be happy to answer them. But until that time, everybody, please be safe, and thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye.
We have to go to the root. We have to go to the cause. Dealing with the condition itself is not enough. And it is because of our effort toward getting straight to the root that people often